to worship with Port Orchard United Methodist Church. It is good to be here in the presence of our God. In Psalm 1 we find these words, "Happy are those whose delight is in the law of the Lord. They are like trees planted by streams of water which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper." It is good to be drawing near to the Lord who plants us so that we may prosper. Let us worship and rejoice as we sing.
To feet and a light to my path.
I have sworn an oath and confirmed it to observe your righteous ordinances.
I am severely afflicted. Give me life, O Lord, according to your word. Accept my offerings of praise, O Lord, and teach me your ordinances. I hold my life in my hand continually, but I do not forget your law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, but I do not stray from your precepts. Your decrees are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. I incline my heart to perform your statutes forever, to the end.
We have a couple prayer requests today. Specifically, Don Bader is preparing for surgery in a couple of weeks, and his wife Anita, who is struggling with Parkinson's, will need much care while he is away in hospital, perhaps for up to a week. And so they are preparing, and they ask for prayers for healing and peace as they do this. We also lift up Phyllis Wilder in celebration. She had recent PET scans for her cancer, and she is thrilled to announce that right now there's no sign of cancer. So we celebrate with her. We also celebrate the life of Wiley Yee. Wiley passed away this past week. He and his wife were members here at Port Orchard Church many years ago. We celebrate that Wiley is in the church triumphant, and we lift up our prayers of compassion for Mamie and for her family. Mamie does send to you all thanks for your compassion and your prayers and your support that you have provided for the family. I invite you now to a time of prayer. When the prayer is ended, I will invite you to pray our Lord's Prayer. The words will be on the screen. Holy and marvelous God, you have gifted us with this world that is full of abundance, that is full of growing and blooming and producing things, that is full of critters that sing songs and tiptoe along the earth's paths. This earth that is full of people who know how to be generous and kind and compassionate. You have gifted us with the breath of life that we can breathe in and out, and we can participate in all that happens on this planet that you have created. You have especially gifted us with your sacred presence through the gift of your Christ, who walked among us and who taught us and who loves us and showed us how we can do the acts of compassion and the acts of healing and the acts of truth-telling that you yearn for us to do. We confess that we're not always good about responding to you. We confess that sometimes we turn our back on you or on what you would have us do. We confess that sometimes we stop up our ears and do not hear you. Unstop our ears, soften our hearts, call our name again, that we may turn to you, that we may return to you, that we may open ourselves up to your grace and your mercy and all that is good that you want to shower upon us each day. It is our joy to claim the place of followers of your Christ. It is our joy to say yes when he calls our name. It is our joy to pray the prayer that he taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. We bring our song, we bring our praises, we bring our prayers, we bring ourselves, And we bring all the resource gifts that we have that we love to deliver back into God's hands to do beautiful things with. As we make our gifts, let us also sing praise to our God.
Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ His Son. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because He's given Jesus Christ His Son. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what the Lord has done for us. And now let the weak say, I am strong. Let the poor say, I am rich, because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks. Give thanks.
That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there, while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Today I'm at South Kitsap Helpline here in Port Orchard. It's where our food bank is, where they help lots of people in lots of ways, but especially with food. They were wonderful to let me come and make this video here where they do such marvelous work. Look at all the great food that is growing behind me. Look at those great big artichokes over there, and you can't see the strawberries. And over on this side, there's squashes getting ready to do amazing things, and there are tomatoes growing and potatoes under the ground, and behind the camera there are apples and rhubarb, and oh, it's just amazing, all the wonderful things that are growing. And over there along the fence are gorgeous flowers. They might not feed the tummy, but they sure feed the soul, so that people feel wonderful when they eat them. You know, growing all this stuff, it takes a bit of work. You can't just put plants and seeds in the ground and wait and see what happens. It's important that you water them, and that you fertilize them, and that you make sure they get plenty of sun, that they're not shaded out, and that it's warm enough. That's why the greenhouse is back there. That's to help plants be warm enough when it's cold outside. The greenhouse can help plants be warm to get started on growing. You know, our faith is kind of like that. Our churches and our family, they plant the faith in us. They give it to us as a gift. But if we don't do something with it, it just withers and dies, and it doesn't produce much. But if we take the time to feed and water and nurture our faith, if we take time to study and to talk with other people about it, to do things that God asks us to do, then our faith can grow like crazy. And we will feel strong, and we will feel well nourished, and we will feel wonderful as disciples in God's kingdom. May that happen to you. May you take and grow your faith so that you can be strong for God. I want to give thanks to Jennifer and Jeanette over at South Kitsap Helpline, to thank them for permitting us to come over and film this week. Pictures of their garden and all the things that they are growing so that they may feed the hungry here in Port Orchard. They also have plants now and then to sell that you may purchase, and the sale of those plants provides cash for Helpline to also purchase things to give to their clients. Thank you for your gifts to Helpline. Now, as many of you know, I love gardening. I find that pulling weeds, especially some of the big ones, or pruning, chopping off stuff, it can be very therapeutic. I also enjoy the bounty of produce, the flowers. It's rewarding. And when I'm cooking in my kitchen, there's a specialness to the interruption of the cooking process that requires me to go out to the garden to clip off some spices or herbs that are growing there, specifically for the dish that I'm making. Now, currently we are living in a rental property that does not have the possibility of in-the-ground gardening. So we have containers. Now, I haven't actually counted them, but I suspect we have almost 30 containers. The largest is a dresser. It's about a yard square. It's an old dresser that was dumped in the church parking lot. I took it home, and I took the drawers out, and I laid it on its back and filled it up with dirt. And in there I have 4 hills of zucchini growing, and they're full of blossoms. They're full of promise. Those containers are all set out along our driveway because that's the best place of the sun. And so every day when I go to work or come back from work, I see those containers, and either on my way in or my way out, I get out the hose and I water them, and it's just a good coming and going, a hello and goodbye to the home and to the gardens, and it's beautiful, and they do well. But these days, I'm not coming and going on a daily basis. These days, sometimes I stop and I think, goodness, it's been 2 or 3 days since I've even been out of the house. And since I haven't been out of the house, I haven't seen the pots, and since I haven't seen the pots, I haven't been watering them. And you know, container gardens, they kind of need daily water in a climate like ours. Oops. Shall I tell you about my Pinterest fail? You understand what Pinterest fails are. They're when you see on Pinterest, one of the websites or the great sharing options online, where people have these beautifully executed projects, and they make pictures and they post them, and then the rest of us go and we say, oh, that's awesome, I can do that, and then we do it, and our what we produce is less than optimal. It's not quite as good, or maybe it's a long way from as good. Well, I saw on Pinterest this container garden project for growing lettuce. And the project is very simple. You take a fresh sack of garden soil or potting soil, maybe Miracle Grow even with the fertilizer in it, and you poke holes on the bottom of the container, and then you lay it flat. On the top, you cut out most of the top of the bag, and you line it with duct tape just to add security, and you water it and you plant your seed in. And I did that. I did it great. I planted my lettuce seed in, and then, you know, that 2 and 3 days without watering, not a good thing. So I planted a second package of lettuce seeds. Still, the 2 or 3 days without watering is still not a good thing. Major Pinterest fail. Now, the seed, you know, maybe the seed was bad. For all I know, it could be bad, and I could blame that. But frankly, I think I played a big role in the failure of that project. Over our lifetimes, every one of us has had planted within us, or attempted to have planted within us, the seeds of Christian faith. And if we're here today in worship or watching online somehow, then we want that Christian faith planted within us, and we want it to grow. But just like with those lettuce seeds, more than mere planting is necessary. You know, the faith that was planted within you, within me, is good seed. It is good seed, and it will grow if it is tended. It's filled with rich kernel, and it's ready to grow. It's full of potential for beauty, potential for fruit. And God is ready to help us make it grow. But as with any gardening project, we have to ask, what about the soil? Now, for container gardening, the first thing we have to do is make sure the containers are well prepared. We have to scrub them out, remove everything that will inhibit plant growth. In containers, we wash away fungi and other sources of infection. If we are planting in the ground, we make sure to avoid clay spots and too many rocks, unless we're planting cacti. The good news for our faith is that whatever condition our container is in, it's an okay place for planting Christian faith. Our personal containers do not need to be perfect. Whatever containers they are, God is happy and capable of planting faith and making something come out of it. Now, over time, it would be good for us to remove whatever might be toxic to our faith, whatever would be stumbling blocks to our growth. Perhaps we avoid talking faith with people who dismiss faith or who ridicule faith, especially when we're first growing our faith. We might feel too fragile and tender to risk that kind of thing. After a while, perhaps we're strong, we can stand up to that kind of ridicule of our faith and tell people, you're not permitted to dismiss this from me. We might stand up to the people who would interrupt our faith time, who would make it difficult for us to have daily devotions, or who get in the way of us attending worship, whether it's online or in person, who challenge us when we want to go spend faith time with friends. And if you have family and friends who are supportive of your efforts to grow your faith, be sure to thank them for the gifts that they give you. Another thing that we can do with the soil of our faith is we can avoid poor theology. When you read books or articles or you watch TV shows or movies, do so critically. Because not all of the stuff that's put out there in God's name is good stuff. Just because something claims to be godly does not mean that it is. You need to listen to it or read it and evaluate it in light of what you already know. And say, is this consistent with the God whom I have fallen in love with the God whom I've come to know? And if you have questions, talk with somebody else you trust. The conversation itself will be wonderful, and it can help you sort out questions that you have. Now, for any garden, we must choose a location that is appropriate. Every plant has its own requirements of sunshine and moisture. You know, if we plant full sun-loving plants like tomatoes, if we plant them in deep shade, they're not going to do very well. If we plant mushrooms, who like it damp and dark, if we plant them in full sun, they're just going to dry up and die. And if we plant cacti in low-lying areas where water tends to collect, the cacti won't do so well. It's better to plant blueberries there. For our faith to grow, we must plant it in life where it has the possibility to grow well. For each of us, our faith needs the right amount of time spent in devotions and prayer and Bible reading. For each of us, our faith needs the right amount of serving others. And it's up to us as individuals to experiment with what we need. For what we need today might not be the same as what we need tomorrow. If we're growing onions, they need lots of water early in the season to make these nice big juicy bulbs, but later in the season they need it to be drier so that they can harden and get ready for storage. Our faith is a lot like that. We need to include light and water and all the things that can help us to grow, but in different quantities at different times as is specific for you. Sometimes you need to find different perspectives, and so getting different resources can help you have those different perspectives to add different nutrients or whatever it is your faith needs to grow. You know, for years I led Disciple Bible Study. It's like a 4 or 5 year course of Disciple, and we like to call the first year Disciple Red or Disciple 1. And I led Disciple 1 8-10 times, beginning in 1994. And sometimes we would joke that I never graduated from Disciple 1. That's why I had to keep repeating the class, because I couldn't pass it. There are a couple of truths, though. One is that in the process of teaching Disciple 1, I was raising up leaders to lead the next classes. And so those leaders I raised up would go and lead Disciple 2, and I'd go back to Disciple 1 and lead another class. But the classes were never repeats for me. They were always fresh, because every class of people that came in had different perspectives and different ideas and different wonderings and different questions. And as I worked with each of those classes, I learned and grew differently and was blessed by that. I was enriched by it. We don't always need the same thing every day when we are growing. We need to look for variety and new perspective to keep us growing. Now in gardening, often we must add soil amendments to lighten the soil, to add nutrients, maybe to boost the growing power. Many years ago, my family had a garden in the backyard. This is when we lived in Olympia. The previous spring, I had tried growing zucchini in that yard. Didn't work too well. I was very conservative. I planted only one hill because you know how zucchini gets out of control. It did not get out of control. It didn't grow at all. So the next year, we amended the soil. My husband added lots of chicken manure and compost and mulch and other kinds of things. And because I was piqued, so I planted the whole zucchini package. And we had lots of zucchini. You know, some of those ones that grow the size of boats. And we had lots of other things. We have a photograph in our albums of our 3-year-old son, and he's standing there holding a beet. The beet itself is taller than he is. The whole plant with all the greens, and the bulb is like a softball. It was huge. It was just amazing. The soil of our faith needs boosting, because sometimes it might feel depleted. We can add to it with fellowship. We can add to it with time spent with other believers. We can add to the soil of our faith by attending corporate worship, even online, knowing that there are other people that are worshiping with us can add to what we're doing. We can add with support groups and with spiritual guides and with prayer partners in boosting our own faith. This is this amazing thing that we find we also boost other people's faith. You know, at seminary, every professor who came to every class session would bring a devotion. And many times these professors would would bring a reading from a book that they had, and they'd open this book, and some of the books I purchased, and I don't get the same thing out of it as I did when the professor would bring, and they would highlight just a passage, and they would read it for us, and they'd shine a light directly on this passage, and something beautiful would come out of it. It would serve us so well in the place where we were learning and growing at that time. The professor's act of selecting that piece for us and sharing it with us gave a boost to all of our faith as we were struggling with our seminary learning. We also, during that same struggle of learning, would go to midweek chapel services and prayer groups, and all that stuff benefited us immensely. I would recommend it. Find somebody to be a prayer partner with you. In gardening, now and then we add fertilizer, that extra bit of vitamins that promote full growing power. In our faith life, now and then we have opportunities for retreats. Maybe they're solo retreats, maybe they're silent retreats, maybe they're retreats with a large group or multiple workshops or themes. Sometimes they're renewal events or conferences or concert-style worships. These are special icing on the cake for our faith life. Icing on cake is something everybody needs now and then, at least on their own birthday. You have been planted with good seed. You have been planted with good seed. And when good seed grows well, plants are alive and vigorous, full, healthy foliage, and a good crop of blossoms and fruit and more seed. Faith that is planted within you has the potential to grow beautifully and to be highly productive if you give it the opportunity and the best care. In our gardening these days, we are not accustomed to growing and saving for seeds. We have professionals that do that. It's kind of neat in Eastern Washington to drive past the signs that say seed peas and seed potatoes and seed corn. In our own gardens, more often than not, we trim our plants before they go to seed so that they'll produce more fruit and they'll produce more flowers, which is what we were trying to grow anyway. In God's planting, seeds are also part of God's desired outcome. God would like you and I to nurture the development of seeds so that we too can plant them in others as others once planted them in us. Too often I hear parents say they will not teach their children faith, but wait for them to grow up and then they can choose for themselves. These parents leave the ground fallow, and sometimes when ground is left untended, it just goes inert. It loses its ability to nourish any seed. For parents, it may be better to plant something that may need pruning later, that may need transplanting later, that the child may decide to clear out or to grow further. God desires that we plant seeds, that we nourish them to grow, seeds in ourselves and seeds in others. In the United Methodist Church, when we baptize children and others unable to speak for themselves, we promise to nurture these persons in Christ's holy church, that by our teaching and our example, they may be guided to accept God's grace for themselves, to profess their faith openly, and to lead a Christian life. We say that every time we baptize a young person. For others, we promise, with God's help, we will so order our lives after the example of Christ, that surrounded by steadfast love, you may be established in the faith and confirmed and strengthened in the way that leads to life eternal. We promise that when we baptize adults. Somewhere, at some time, someone did this for you. They planted the faith within you. It is always time to tend to your own planting. It's always time to do your own pruning and watering and feeding so that you may produce, so that you may grow, so that you may do all these beautiful things for the kingdom of God, so that the fruits of love and the fruits of mercy and the fruits of kindness and the fruits of grace will be abundant. Fruits of forgiveness, fruits of generosity, but also seeds that we can plant in one another that will grow in the eternal grace of God. When the Apostle Paul wrote the second letter to the church at Thessalonica, he began with these words, and I offer them to you as a benediction. We must always give thanks to God for you, brothers and sisters, siblings, as is right, because your faith is growing abundantly and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. Therefore we ourselves boast of you among the churches of God for your steadfastness and faith during all your persecutions and the afflictions you are now enduring. Let this be a benediction and a blessing unto you. Amen.
All this pain, I wonder if I'll ever find my way. I wonder if my life could really change at all. All this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? Could a garden come up from this ground at all? You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. All around, hope is springing up from this old ground. Out of chaos, life is being found in you. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. Things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things, you make beautiful things out of us.